aside from me reading out half of your bio, can you give us the full story on who you are? Why did this random guy on the bus be like, I need you to hear this woman?
I mean, probably the random guy on the bus saw my TED Talk because it's the second most viewed TED Talk. I definitely got into psychology because of my head injury, which is funny because people joke that psychologists are all doing me search. People aren't very happy for each other's successes, and so they feel that they're in competition rather than in a collaborative environment, I would say. Touching our arms, wrapping ourselves up, all of those things are signs of powerlessness, and we see that not just in humans but also in non-human animals. The more powerless they feel, the more they contract. The more powerful they feel, the more they expand.
Hi everyone, welcome back to a new episode of Dare to be Fearless. I'm at the Kin in Venice right now. I used to come here over the summer, I think actually, and film a lot of episodes here, and it's definitely one of my favorite places in LA for podcasting. And I also had Michael and Lewis, who are the DJs behind Autograph. Michael started the Kin, and so there's an episode on Dare to be Fearless as well with them from quite a while ago. But before I get into this episode, make sure to follow Dare to be Fearless on social media at Dare and the number 2 Be Fearless, as well as my personal social media, Alexa_Curtis. So before I introduce Amy in, I actually have a fun story of how I came across her work. Maybe I think 12 months ago, I was in LA, went to the airport, and anyone who knows LA knows that getting from the airport in LA to any other part of California, especially like the east side, is so expensive. And so sometimes I take the bus, which I've stopped doing because it takes honestly so long. I can't handle it. But on this particular experience, I left the airport and then I found like the Santa Monica City bus. I walked. It was ridiculous. Long story short, I'm on the bus, which is a very questionable thing to do in LA because the public bus system here is very questionable. There's a young man next to me, and people in LA really, I just don't find talk as much as they do in other cities. But this guy started talking to me. What are you doing here? Blah, blah, blah. And I told him I live here. He was like a student, and he was in LA for a visa he had to get for a trip. I told him about my podcast, and he said, you really need to get this woman, Amy Cuddy, on the show. And he showed me her social media, and he was like, I follow her, and I love her, and da-da-da. And I just think it was really cute because a lot of times people avoid talking to other people or you don't want to introduce yourself, and that's just not the way to be. So Amy, I have her here close to, I think, a year later.
That's amazing. It's a great story. I love that.
So you are a incredible, incredible role model. I'm going to read off your bio so I don't butcher it with everything about you, but you're a social psychologist, best-selling author, and keynote speaker. You also have a TED Talk from 2012 called Your Body Language May Shape Who You Are, along with a lot of content online about young people. A video recently, actually, that we were just talking about young men and women and collapsing, and a lot about body language, etc., which is a very niche topic that isn't nearly addressed enough. You also have been honored with some of the highest commendations for both your teaching and your research, including the Excellence in Teaching Awards from Harvard and the Scientific Impact Award from the Society for Experimental Social Psychology for your research on intergroup conflict. And you are also a guest lecturer at Harvard Business School and at UCLA.
Yeah.
So, that particular topic when it comes to like kids' body image,
Yes,
as well as getting older and dealing with insecurity, lack of confidence, how to talk to people. Would love to cover that today.
Yeah.
But, aside from me reading out half of your bio, can you give us the full story on who you are? Why did this random guy on the bus be like, I need you to hear this woman?
I mean, probably the random guy on the bus saw my TED Talk because it's the second most viewed TED Talk. And it's just one of those viral things that has a life of its own. So I'm guessing that's how. But wow, I mean, it was such a circuitous journey, as most journeys are, I would say. I never thought that I would end up at a place like Harvard and then end up at Venice Beach roller skating almost every day. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Bronchitis like weeks ago.
Oh, me too. It didn't go away for weeks.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
it's like
I had to
still
get
just
medicine.
bothering me.
No.
Okay, sorry.
No, you're talking to the queen of bronchitis here. I seem to get it twice a year now.
Out there on the East Coast, here it's like
Awful.
I don't know. Okay, I'm relieved to hear that because I'm like, why?
And it's so uncomfortable because you're coughing and you don't want to be like, I'm contagious, but you're like about to die.
I know, and it's like I felt better, and anyway, okay. So, yeah. So I it's funny because as much as I never thought I would end up at Harvard, just backing up a bit, as much as I never thought I would end up at Harvard, I also never thought I would end up roller skating and living in Venice Beach, which is equally exciting in my opinion. But I grew up in a really working class rural part of Pennsylvania. I didn't expect to. I didn't know what I would do. I was just hoping I'd get out and go to college, and so I did. And I worked as a roller skating waitress in college, and I had a really serious head injury in a car accident in college. A lot of things that kind of slowed me down a bit, and made my journey a little bit more exciting. And took me 4 extra years to finish school because of the head injury.
What type of injury?
A head injury.
From falling?
Oh, no, a car accident. So I was thrown out of a car going 80 miles per hour. We were driving from Montana to Boulder overnight, and my friend fell asleep driving, and the car rolled, and I was thrown out of the car. So my other friends were fine. They were in their seatbelts. So I like to always say that because people always Google Amy Cuddy car accident, and just so you know, everyone else was fine, and I'm happy about that. But I was in the hospital for a long time, and it took me a long time to recover from that, like a very long time. And my doctors didn't think I would finish school, so they were hoping that I would be like high functioning and have a job, and that didn't sound good enough for me. And so I worked really hard to kind of relearn to learn.
And then at what age was that?
19.
Okay. So you're at school, and then you leave school, you graduate.
Well, that was in my second year, and I was obviously withdrawn from school. So I kept trying to go back, but I couldn't think clearly. And so I had to have a lot of cognitive therapy, and finally finished 4 years later.
Got it.
So there was a long period of like sort of trying to go back and dropping out, trying to go back, dropping out, and then really just focusing on learning, and in a really effortful, conscious way that was different. It wasn't as natural, and at the same time it became a kind of skill as opposed to a natural ability.
Yeah. Do you feel like that is kind of what made you want to get into this particular field of research?
Oh yeah, I definitely got into psychology because of my head injury, which is funny because people joke that psychologists are all doing me search. And that's why I got into psychology, because I was like, why don't we understand more about this kind of brain injury? Yeah. And so I worked in a lab studying brain injury for a year, and then switched to social psychology, which just felt like a better fit for me.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating. It reminds me of, I don't know if you know Jim Quick, his book Limitless.
Yeah.
And he talks, I think he had a learning disability or some type of accident. And that's really what made him want to research, like, why can't people remember things better? Which is cool, because I think a major problem right now in society is that young people, they expect that these things will happen to them overnight.
Yes.
Success and whatnot. But sometimes it takes something like what happened to you or him.
Yeah.
Kind of make you want to.
I don't want people to have to experience that kind of adversity, but I do feel like it's always been natural for people to take things for granted, especially when they're younger. And that was something that I really took for granted. I think that we kind of imagine that like our bodies will change and our, where we live will change, but we don't imagine how much our minds could change, how much our brains could change. And due to lots of different things, things like trauma, but also, like emotional trauma, but also to injuries like that. So I never thought that my intelligence was something that was fragile. And that was pretty upsetting to me, because I think more than I realized, it was a part of my identity. I knew that I was smart, and I knew that I didn't have to work that hard to do well in school. And so I could kind of slack off, and that was okay. And I did slack off a bit in the beginning of college, for sure. I'm a deadhead. Like, I was following the dead around. I was like, but it's fine because I can catch up fast. And then I realized now I can't. And that is not something that I will ever take for granted. So it's so funny when people think about like youth and what they are sort of are envious of when they think of young people. It's brains to me. It's all about how fast their brains work.
Crazy.
And I don't feel old, but my son's 22, and I just can't believe how much he and his friends get done. I mean, they do work a lot, but they're so creative and so fast, and I'm envious of that. I'm happy for him, but very envious.
Yeah. Do you think that's a product of your environment, though? Because then there's a lot of parents who, their kid won't leave their bedroom, games all day, doesn't know how to talk to people.
I feel like, yes, and okay, a couple things. My son graduated from high school in 2020, so he was in that COVID class. Yeah. So he, missed the last few months, and we kind of felt like, oh, we better go do something. So we moved to Park City for like a year so that we could be outside doing stuff, skiing, whatever, hiking every day, so that he wouldn't get stuck. And he's a musician. He didn't want to go to music school, do remote music school. But I also think that I feel lucky that he found something that he loved. And that is part coincidence, that's part luck. It's part encouragement. It is in part parents noticing what brings joy to their kid and encouraging them to do that, even if it's not what they expected them to do. For me, as a lover of live music, I was not at all sad when it turned out my son is, this great musician and loves doing it. But, I was never pushing him to be a doctor or a lawyer or a professor.
Is that though maybe because your path has been so?
Yeah, I think that for most of his life, well, for all of his life, I was in academia. I was a second-year grad student at Princeton when he was born, and I was I was either a PhD student or a professor until he finished high school. And so I did not want that life for him. It was a lot of work and, not the healthiest workplace environment in general. I would say academia, it's probably top 10 when you look at unhealthy workplaces.
Really?
Yeah, higher education in particular.
Well, there's a lot of bureaucracy, right?
A lot of bureaucracy, not a lot of resources, a lot of scarcity mindset, a lot of fighting over status. People aren't very happy for each other's successes. And so they feel that they're in competition rather than in a collaborative environment, I would say. So I didn't want him to feel that just because, he has parents with PhDs, that's what he needed to do.
Mm-hmm. But when you go and tell also a young person, though, in a sense, like that they can be creative, which ideally would be ideal, right? But if you don't have that traditional backing, you have the university and all of that behind you, but do you feel like for this new generation, with how much they struggle with interpersonal connections and conversations, that it should be something that parents talk to their kids about more cautiously, in a sense of okay, do something cool with your life, but keep a day job kind of thing?
No one size fits all approach, but I do feel like we could do better at paying attention to the cues. So I know this seems like a strange thing, but it kind of connects to the body language. What I'm kind of most known for is my research on powerful posture, expansive posture, and how that makes us feel. People call it power posing. I call it expansive posture versus contractive posture, which is what we do when we feel powerless. So you can really see that in other people. And as you start to observe other people collapsing, you see what happened right before that. What made them collapse? What was it that made them feel powerless? And so as you begin to observe that in other people that you're around, if you're a parent, you really notice it in your kids. And I started to notice around middle school that body language changed a bit, especially for girls. I saw his female friends were much more likely to start collapsing than the boys, but I still was very mindful of his body language. And I noticed that at times he'd be on his phone or on his computer and he would just kind of, deflate. And as soon as that happened, I'd say, "What just happened?" And he'd be like, "How do you know something happened?" And I'd say, "It's because your body language changed." And it was always something on social media. And he started to make that tie. So I'd say, "Let's get up, let's walk around, let's do something else." When he realized that his body language was tied to these things that he was choosing to be engaged in.
Like what?
Being on Snapchat.
Okay.
Or gaming. And I don't understand gaming well, but like gaming in a communal kind of, with other people.
Yeah, fine.
He realized he hated feeling the way he felt when he felt powerless. He started to be able to remove himself from those situations when he had that feeling. And so I think one of the things that we're missing right now is giving our kids a sense of agency. I'm so much about this that we do have to let them make mistakes, but to allow them to have agency, to feel that they can to some extent control their outcomes through their choices, through their interactions, through how they carry themselves. That is going to be so important to their success, not just now, but in their lives in the future.
Okay, I have a lot of questions on that topic, but I want to know, can you give like an example with your body of like when you're talking about these movements? So like even when I like slouch back, right?
Yeah.
What does that mean something? Or like that's not really what
You're not very slouchy at all.
But I'm only standing up this straight because I don't like my dress doesn't look good if I like usually I would sit like this.
Yeah, but you're still not slouching.
Okay, so
your
what is that?
Shoulders are still back.
Is it the shoulders?
I mean, you're just leaning back.
Yeah, okay.
So slouch, I mean, contractive posture is when you are kind of collapsing your chest. So your shoulders are up and forward. And you might be not just crossing your legs, which is fine, but also twisting your ankles or touching your face or your neck, playing with your jewelry or your hair.
Is it anxiety?
It's anxiety. And powerlessness, a feeling that we can't protect ourselves. It's fear, touching our arms, wrapping ourselves up. All of those things are signs of powerlessness. And we see that not just in humans, but also in non-human animals. The more powerless they feel, the more they contract. The more powerful they feel, the more they expand. Same for humans. And so what interests me about that is not what does it convey to other people? It's what is that doing to our own mindset, and how can we take control of that? And it's not just for adults, and I talk about it in the context of things like job interviews or giving a public speech, but it's also relevant to our kids. And we teach our kids to sit up straight, but it's often done as a show of respect to others. So if somebody comes over for dinner, and I know this is a little dated, but you might hear parents say, like, sit up straight.
Yeah,
with a sort of like, come on, sit up straight, because they want you to look, grown up and respectable to the guests. But kids aren't going to sit up straight for that reason. If you help them understand that when they sit up straight, they feel better, that's a much more powerful, potent, effective lesson.
So how do you then clarify or tell that to a kid, right? Like sit up straight so you feel better.
I think you start by noticing when they slouch.
Got it.
And when they are showing expansive body language. So, when they're really looking confident, asking them, "Hey, you look so happy. I love how powerful you're feeling. Tell me what's been happening in the last half hour." To capture the moments instead of the kid comes home from school and you're like, "Did you have a good day? What happened? That's not the moment. Watch for those shifts in their body language and use that as an opportunity to say, "Hey, I'd love to know what's going on for you."
So in one of the videos you have where you talk about like kids collapsing and predominantly girls, I think you said around age 11.
Yeah.
Is it the body, like that's the posture that you're explaining when you're saying collapsing?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
You start to see there is a big gender difference for adults between men and women and expansive body language. So women are much more likely to contract than men are. And the question for me as a social psychologist was, is that learned or is that somehow innate? And when you look at little kids before they hit middle school, you don't really see very big gender differences. Girls are just as likely to be like throwing their arms up in the air and taking up space and doing cartwheels and being in charge. When they hit middle school, so that's around age 11, you start to see the girls really collapsing. And not all girls, people get defensive about this because they're like, well, my daughter doesn't do that. And what I have to say is that is awesome. I'm so glad if your daughter doesn't do that. That like you're doing something right. And but they're getting a lot of signals that they're supposed to take up less space, even if it's unintentional or implicit. I've had fathers say to me, when I talk about this research, they say, I realize that in my effort to protect my daughter, I'm signaling to her that she should take up less space. It's not that I don't want her to be powerful. It's that I'm a little bit afraid that if she shows her power, she'll be at risk of being hurt by someone else. And so I think that's so interesting for us to explore all the unintentional ways in which we might be messaging more to our daughters than our sons that they should take up less space. I'm not saying that all parents are doing that. They're also just seeing lots of images of women and girls who are taking up less space. It's getting better, but we can do even better. Because I think the fact that it's a change, they're born expanding. They start to collapse. That means we have this whole 10-year window where we can continue to encourage them to take up space so that when they get to that age where they tend to collapse, they're less likely to.
Do it. So say someone's watching this and they notice like they're in their mid-20s or their 30s and they notice that they do that.
Yeah.
Maybe their parents didn't teach them or whatnot about it. How do you then circumvent the fact that you weren't educated about this as a kid to fix it in your 20s, 30s?
Oh, I think there's so many ways. So, I mean, there are simple changes that you can make, but I'll just go through a handful of them. So expanding is not just about sitting up straight. It's also about, the way we breathe, the way we speak, the way we walk, the way we move. So if we start at the top of the head and think about breathing, we can breathe in ways that are more or less expansive. So if we breathe deeply and slowly, we're triggering what's called the relaxation response, and that calms us down and makes us feel more confident and safe. So if you are going into a stressful situation and you find that you're breathing quickly and shallowly, which is what we do, and that's triggering the fight, flee, or faint response, slow your breathing. Slow it down, expand your body as you breathe.
Like just
breath, deep breathing. I mean, there's a lot more on breath work now than there was 10 years ago, but my favorite is just called 4-7-8 breathing, where you inhale for 4 counts, hold it for 7, exhale for 8, and repeat that 3 times. They don't have to be full seconds, just equal interval counts. So 4, inhale, 7, hold, 8, exhale. Just try that, and you will notice your body relax. I do that before I go to sleep at night. It helps me get to sleep because I'm already fairly relaxed. If I'm not relaxed, if I'm stressed out and going into a situation that makes me feel more stressed out, doing that before I walk in brings my emotional arousal level down so that I am preparing my mindset to deal well in that situation.
Yeah. Do you manifest?
I don't really know exactly what that word means.
And I don't either. I have no idea.
I hear it a lot. Yeah. This is the word that I probably hear the most since I moved from the East Coast to the West Coast. I don't really know what it means. Yeah. Like, I think it means something different to everybody. So, I mean, to me, I guess the concept of manifesting would be to do what you can to prepare your mindset so that you are going to be the most present in these challenging moments and more likely to get the outcome that you want. But to me, more important than getting the outcome that you want, more likely to feel satisfied with that interaction. Yeah. Feel that when you walk away, you can walk away feeling that you were seen. So I guess that would be the closest to manifesting.
There was my friend started Intelligent Change, Mimi Icon, and you have a quote, and do you know this? They quoted you in her journal.
I'm not sure.
Do you know what this? Oh my God. Okay, well I have to. You've got to know this.
Sorry. Okay.
Which is why I was actually very excited to. Well, aside from you being so cool, anyway. So Mimi started this company. She sold her first company, and then she started another one called Intelligent Change. It's the creator of like the 5-minute journal, the gratitude journal. I'll show you. But they quoted you on the bottom of it. But she talks a lot about, I had her actually on the show 2 weeks ago, but she talks a lot about manifesting and whatnot. And I have to be honest, like, that's great, but I'm kind of in the same boat of you. It's like, I think people have this thought process of like, I got my goals because I manifested. And I'm like, yeah, but I also realize sometimes when I was waking up every day, which I still do, but and like, journaling and then working out and the water and the coffee, that routine sometimes actually was making me crazier than just waking up and being like, today I want to do this.
Oh yeah, I'm a today I want to do this person.
I just need, like, you can manifest and sit there, but that's
what I'm manifesting.
Yeah.
What I'm manifesting is today I'm watching baking shows.
I love this. My anxiety sometimes comes from like, because not all of your dreams are going to come true, or they're going to come true in other ways.
No.
So.
And that's why like I'm so back to the idea of manifesting and the idea of walking away with satisfaction. That you there are so many factors that are outside of your control that could stop you from getting the outcome. Like, for example, say it's a job interview or a college interview. You don't know who else is interviewing. You don't know what that interviewer is looking for. There's so many things that you can't control. All you can do is show up as your best self and leave knowing that you did everything that you can do. If the only way you're going to be happy is if you get the outcome that you want, I mean, you're going to be unhappy a lot of your life. I mean, life is kind of like a basketball game, back and forth, where people are missing baskets, getting baskets. It's a lot of mini failures and mini wins. So I think we have to be happy with how we show up, and that. So I guess you can manifest that, but I don't feel. I'm a scientist and I'm a social psychologist. So what I study is how other people influence our thoughts and feelings and behaviors and outcomes. So I'm very aware that we aren't totally in control, but that we do need to seize the agency that we do have, because people are happier when they have voice, when they have a sense of personal power and agency. When we think of happiness, we think of positive mood, lack of stress, maybe sense of purpose, but we forget that the fourth piece that is so critical is agency. So say you feel happy, you don't feel stressed, and you feel that you're spending your days doing purposeful work. That's great. But what if you don't feel that you have any power in your life? I mean, you can't possibly have very sustainably high subjective well-being. And so that piece is so important. And when you look at societies that have the highest subjective well-being scores, what you see are societies where each individual has voice and agency, like Denmark and Norway.
Oh yeah, I mean, Europe is so much better sometimes with this stuff.
And even you get to a micro level and you really see that that's the difference, where individuals have a say, and they know they do, and that means that they're more likely to thrive. Their kids are more likely to thrive.
As a social psychologist, then, how do you advise someone who is at that place where they're like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life? How do you get them to a place where they wake up every day and feel like, I see a future for myself?
The most important thing is to not be locked onto a path, I think. There's a lot of advice that people are going to give about on this topic. I only want yours,
because everything else is bullshit.
I don't know if everything else is, but I cannot tell you how much I believe that you don't know what your path is and that that's a good thing. Your path is all you know is what your path has been and where you are right now. But I'm not saying that you can't strive for certain things, but there are opportunities that are going to come your way. And if you're locked onto one path, you will not see them and you're going to miss them. I mean, I didn't think I would live out here, right? But I love roller skating. And I realized that I didn't want to just have this path in academia. And I had to, when I started to become open to that, to other things that made me happy, that's when I was able to build a life that really suits me.
Was that a mindset shift then? You're saying to like open your, because you seem to me like someone who always would have been quite open with the stuff.
I think I was very open. I was always very open-minded, and I was a hippie deadhead. Went to CU Boulder. I'm outdoorsy, and I fit that kind of type, I guess. But I also then spent 20 years in, mostly like Ivy League universities, which is not somewhere I expected to end up. But that got me a bit locked in. So in part because I felt like I didn't belong there and I was supposed to want to be there because I looked around and everyone seemed like this was the most important thing in the world to be in this place. And so I better work hard to stay in this place. And so I think I did stop thinking for myself in some ways. And I just started to follow the script. That's not to say that I didn't love teaching and research. I really, really did. But there were other things about it. Like I remember I was on a job interview and the guy interviewing me said, "What are your hobbies?" And I couldn't come up with anything. And he sort of shamed me. It was weird. It was a very weird situation. But I felt like, but I've been working so hard and I had a kid while I was in grad school and like, how can I have hobbies? And I thought my hobbies they seemed at odds with what I was supposed to be as a Harvard professor. But then what happened is I started to connect more with the students who also felt like outsiders, who felt like they came from different backgrounds. They didn't have a fancy pedigree. And they really felt like imposters. And so they started to find me and talk to me. And I realized that it was really important for me to be myself so that they realized they could be themselves. So that was a big switch for me when I realized that my being myself is one of the best things that I can do as a mentor to them.
That's so true. I mean, I started a new company in like August after my worst year in business. And the first person I hired, he said to me so many times, and I was like, "I'm paying you. Like, this must be why you're saying this." And he literally, we had a really bad month, and he was like, "You don't even need to pay me this month." And that's when I was kind of like, maybe you're right. But he was like, the biggest asset to this company is you, your voice, your story, like all the time. But I think when you're going through the motions, even like being a founder, but building this particular business that's e-commerce, it's my brain running the business, but it's not my face or the product that I'm selling, So it's very hard sometimes, I think, to grapple with that type of confidence.
Yeah.
That's ambition. But then also most of the most successful people I know, they're not going to sit here and be like, "I'm the best person you're ever going to meet."
No. I mean, no. Well, it's funny. Not the ones I like, at least.
Exactly. Not the ones I like.
Like, well,
the self-made ones.
Some,
no.
But I don't think so. It's funny. I was thinking about a situation that I've dealt with recently where, I've been working with someone and when I have an important question, about the project that we're working on that does need to be addressed, I think they're maybe conflict avoidant, or maybe they feel disorganized and they're having trouble figuring out how to respond to an email. I don't know. But when I keep pushing and finally get a response or we get on the phone, I feel that they present themselves as if they're so together. And it feels strange to me because I feel like, this doesn't match. I feel like in some ways I'd rather the person say, look, I'm a hot mess. Honestly, rather than say like, I got my stuff together. I just want people to be honest about where they are. If you say, I am a hot mess, like things are really tough for me right now, I am going to be so compassionate.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been there many, many times. And that makes me feel much more understanding about why you can't respond. So I do feel like, I want people to be human with each other because it's validating. I mean, when people are human with us, we feel like, oh, okay, I'm okay to be myself.
I agree. And I think
a bit of a ramble. Sorry.
No, I totally agree. And I think that that's my problem with social media. And I grapple with that a lot. Like I post all the time online, right? That's part of my brand. But if you're a friend of mine or my family, it's only those people that know really what's happening. And I would say like 9 out of 10 days are really hard.
Yeah.
Like it's not what you post on the internet. But it's the 10th day that you still get up after the 9 days of hell in business or your personal life that I think really matters.
Yes.
But I think that's why kids lack it's ridiculous. I mean, the expectations they have. I want to ask you about like type A and B personalities in terms of your work and whatnot, because a lot of people don't even know the difference between those two personalities.
And I feel like there's more to it than that. But yeah.
I don't know enough. So you even just blanket on what it is.
I think, so let's see. And can we come back to that in a second? Because I want to say one more thing about social media and the perfection. I mean, which I know people are talking about all the time, but I want to just talk openly about how frustrating I find social media. Like I find Instagram just to be so perplexing and frustrating. I have no idea why some things are going to take off and some don't. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I need to be on there or not. I want to do it because I enjoy it. But you get so many mixed messages as somebody who's kind of a public figure about the role of social media. Is it important? Is it not important? And so I want to be honest. I want to be myself. I want there to be room for me to be myself. And if being myself means I don't get more followers, so be it.
It's so crazy to me, though, that you're even thinking like that because your job, you're not getting paid to post on Instagram.
No.
So why, just out of curiosity, like why even care? You already have a name. You already have success.
Because I do want to share this. I want to share this life that I built that has so many different elements, especially for women who are my main demographic, which is like 35 to 55, and who feel like somehow they're not supposed to be happy or have fun or feel healthy.
Why do you think?
I think that's just the message they've gotten for a long time. That like this is there's a self-sacrificial piece of it. There's sacrificial motherhood
more than men,
right? Yes, and so. And then like all of the like, oh my gosh, she's over 50 and she looks amazing. It actually doesn't help women that much. I mean, to point out how relevant age seems to be and how we perceive people's beauty, rather than just sort of, celebrating people who are enjoying life and taking care of themselves. So I do feel like I want to be able to share that your life doesn't have to follow any particular path. Again, I'm back to that. Yeah. But I want to do it in a way that allows me when I, do have a book that's ready to, I want to be able to sell my book.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, naturally, but it's hard for me to think about social media in that strategic way.
Yeah. And it's a very strange thing to even think about because it's another element of a personal brand or anyone. I mean, even on TikTok, like, Jessica Alba, the actress?
Yeah.
She joined TikTok. And, the first thing that went through my mind is like the fact that even Jessica Alba has to be on TikTok.
Yeah.
Like this person has hit the peak. It's like, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Don't you have other things you want to do in a day unless you really find it that fun? But I think to me, it just proved that like, in a way, everyone needs to be in it, right? It's like a rat race even when you're already successful.
Totally.
But the common theme is it gives everyone anxiety. Like
I totally agree.
Yeah.
And I think that, I heard somebody say, we used to call it social networking and now we call it social media. Yeah. And that really, networking implies some kind of connection. Mm-hmm. And media does not. Media implies you alone are performing at people.
Yeah.
Whereas networking implies that you are interacting with people. And so that switch happens subtly without us even seeming to notice. But back to the personality types. There are, look, psychologists argue about this, but there are basically 5 dimensions of personality that show up in the research on personality and as predictors of different things in life. And those are, you can think of them as the acronym OCEAN, OCEAN. So one is openness to new experiences. The second is conscientiousness. The third is extroversion. The fourth is agreeableness. And the fifth is neuroticism. So OCEAN. Openness versus closeness, conscientiousness versus, being kind of, less caring about the details, extroversion versus introversion, agreeableness versus, being maybe contrarian, and neuroticism versus being pretty relaxed. So I think all of those variables matter. I think probably type A people would be higher on things like neuroticism, probably lower on openness to new experiences, higher on conscientiousness. So it's a cluster of personality variables.
Yeah. In society nowadays, what do you feel like is something that parents are doing wrong with creating stronger, more intelligent, confident kids? Like anything that they're missing when they're raising kids in this day and age that's making these kids, I think, really struggle with communication and confidence and intelligence and being able to strive for such big things.
This is a hard one for me because it was really hard for me as a mom. Letting your kids have painful experiences and not rushing in to save them. I mean, obviously to be there to support them, but to not say things like, to not imply that this is so unfair and this will never happen again. To help kids be comfortable or not so afraid of uncomfortable emotion. They are going to be disappointed. They are going to feel rejected. They're going to feel let down. They're going to feel like they failed. And rather than, trying to get rid of that emotion, which parents tend to want to do because they don't want their kids to feel bad, we have to help them, explore the emotion, to look at it. What is it? What made you feel that way? Let's talk more about how that feels. And, is it okay for you to sit with it for a minute? What happens if you don't do anything right now to change it? It's probably okay. So to let kids be more comfortable with feeling those things and not feeling like it's the end of the world. We are signaling to them when they feel bad, it's the end of the world. And that is taking their agency away. So I think we have to, I just want to say, I know how hard this is. If I could put my child's heart in a box and protect it, I would. And anyone who hurts my child, doesn't want to deal with Mama Bear. But I can't, I had to learn to not do that with him. I had to learn to let him have hard feelings and help him think about them so that he didn't feel that it was outside of his control or it would ruin his life to have this feeling.
I'm so fascinated by nature versus nurture because you've got, just in society from the beginning of time, right? You've got kids who were raised in massively wealthy families who end up doing socially worse, struggle to, get jobs, end up just kind of mooching off their parents with no purpose in life. And then you have people who come from nothing who achieve such massive success. And then I think a lot of times there's envy and jealousy on both sides. Mm-hmm. So I would love, my first question for you on that is about nature versus nurture. And then the second one is for people who are struggling with feelings of envy and jealousy, either driven by social media or just, perhaps they have a friend who they want to stay friends with, but they're just so jealous that this person's got this type of life.
Yeah. Okay. So I'd say first on nature versus nurture. Again, as a social psychologist, I'm a big believer in our ability to change. And so I don't think that there are a lot of personality variables that we're just stuck with. So I think that we can grow. And to me, the personality variable or the sort of mindset variable that is the most important in terms of our ability to thrive and to be pro-social in our interactions is whether we view the universe as fundamentally friendly or hostile. And you can have enormous social power and wealth or no social power and wealth and see the world as hostile. You can, and likewise, you can see it as friendly. So that does not mean that you're always going to be right. There are people who will be hostile, but which one do you want to default toward? Mm-hmm. If you walk through life seeing other people as potential allies and collaborators, you're much more likely to create opportunities for yourself, to build these healthy relationships, to succeed. If you walk through the world, the world thinking that people are out to get you, then you're much less likely to find collaborators and friends and allies and to succeed. I'm such a big believer in teamwork and not doing things all by yourself. So that hostile versus friendly universe worldview to me is critical. And it is the best predictor of who becomes a bully and who does not. So people who see the world as fundamentally hostile are much more likely to become bullies because they feel that they're competing with everyone. They feel that your success is going to take away from my success.
And is that something that comes from childhood? Like, why do people...
Comes from so many different places. Can come from childhood, can be innate, can come from experiences it's I know that it's an important question. I don't know the answer to it because I would say it's determined by so many different variables. But I think we can become more aware of it in ourselves and shift that. So the second thing, so I find jealousy really interesting personally, because what I had a kind of, I don't think that I'm a generally jealous person, but of course I feel jealousy sometimes. Everyone does. And I don't like it. It makes me feel bad. Like I feel guilty when I feel it. I immediately feel guilty. And instead of feeling guilty or annoyed at this person that I feel jealous of, I realize that jealousy is giving me information. My feeling of jealousy is providing me with information. And what it's telling me is something this person is doing or has is something that you want to be doing or have. And so what can you learn from what they're doing? Because I very rarely feel jealous of people who I think are not likable. The jealousy is usually, or the envy is of people who I do respect and admire. And I want them to do well. And so I ask myself, first of all, does their doing well take away from me? No, not at all. So if it doesn't, what can I learn from what they're doing? And so I think that's, to see jealousy as information and to shift your focus from, I want them to do badly to, oh, okay, there are some things I can change. I think that's really healthy. I think, though, there's another shade that we're talking about that maybe especially younger people are feeling, which is like, what's wrong with me? Yeah. Because what they have seems impossible. And that's different. Because the jealousy that I'm talking about is maybe someone's book is doing phenomenally well, and I don't know, like what's so different about their book versus my book or something like that. That's not the best example, but I don't know, someone's getting booked for more talks. And, usually it's because they're hustling and they're creating new speaking topics that I'm not creating, and there's something that I can do. But this kind of emotion that we're talking about, I almost feel deserves a new name because I don't feel that it's jealousy. I feel that it's a deep sense of inadequacy that's based on the false perception of someone's life. And it's a false perception because they are performing something that's not true. Yeah. And that is a different struggle, and it's deeper and much more critical to our kids' well-being to our well-being. But we're better at filtering that, at saying, wait a minute, is that really that person's life, or is that what they want me to see as their life? But I'm very concerned about this emotional experience. And again, I want to say it's different from jealousy. It has some similar contexts. Let me back up. I'm very concerned about this emotional experience, which is unique from jealousy, although it shares some features. But the difference is that you're not reacting to reality. You're reacting to perceived reality that's actually being performed by someone on social media, for example. And so how do you unpack a complicated emotion like that as, say, a 14-year-old? First you go, okay, is what I'm responding to real? Is what I'm seeing real? It's probably not. And then you say, after you realize it's not real, well, why are they doing that then? Why are they doing that to make me feel a certain way? Or are they doing? There's so much to unpack, and I wish I had an answer for this. I really want to just flag it as a really critically important emotional experience that our kids are having that's feeding their anxiety, and that we do need to help them figure out.
Yeah, I just recently read a book called The Body Keeps Score.
The Body Keeps
Do you know it?
Very well.
And I was actually a phenomenal book. And I was actually quite interested in it. He talks a lot about, he's an MD. He talks a lot about like fight or flight.
Yep.
And how much of that comes from childhood. And I would say, like, if I could define myself, it would be like the person who lives in fight or flight. And I find a lot of sometimes, that's why I'm so curious on why trust fund kids sometimes do worse than someone like myself who didn't come from anything, and they want my life, but all I ever really want out of that side is like, I'm jealous that they came from money, because if I had that, I could do 10x right now, and I wouldn't have to be stressed about paying my rent. And that's very niche.
That's interesting.
But that's where I find a lot of it comes from. And then I think back to the way that I was raised, and that fight or flight, and I struggle sometimes to, I think, live in the moment based on that philosophy.
Yeah. Well, I also am trying to not live in fight or flight. I did not grow up with much, but for me it was about, and I don't talk about this much at all, but it was much more about my experience with my parents, which was in many ways terrifying and terrorizing. And I don't know that I will ever be able to shed that completely. So it's funny, I get like parent envy still at my age. I realize I almost get like parent crushes, like crushes on people who are 20 years older and who I think,
that's cute.
Oh, that's like a dream mom or a dream dad. And so I am fascinated by people who came from really supportive families and still feel really close. That doesn't mean they were perfect. They still fight, but it's okay. They can fight and it can be okay. They're not afraid of one of their parents or both of their parents at all. In fact, they can't imagine being afraid of their parents. That is so important. And, for me, I would say one of my main goals as a parent was to never have my child feel responsible for my emotions. And that doesn't mean to say that what he does doesn't affect me. Of course it does. But I'm responsible for my happiness and well-being. And, if I'm having a hard day, it's okay for him to see it, but I also need him to know that I'm going to be okay, and it's not his job to fix it for me. But if you grow up thinking that you're responsible for your parents' feelings, that is pretty hard to escape.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of these are patterns that are very hard to break out of, right?
Very, very hard.
Unless you go to therapy. Like, I don't know how people have such difficult childhoods and then break out of these patterns later in life on their own.
I think a lot of them do a lot of therapy, but I think they carry around some really deep wounds that they're protecting as well. And so some of them seem to overachieve because that's how they're protecting themselves. Like it's sort of, like if I am really successful, I definitely went through years of feeling like if I'm really successful, then I'm safe. I will be lovable to someone. And that is just, you can't live that way. You can't live that way.
How do you change that?
You start roller skating and following the dead again, I guess. No, but for me, it was rediscovering this community. So I have 2 communities now of people who do not care what I do for work. They don't care if I'm well known or not. But it was finding these communities of people who care about the community and me as a member of the community. It was finding people who love me for me and not for what I do or accomplish.
Do you have any advice for someone who deals with a lot of envy about other people's money or other people's finances?
I mean, look, it's hard right now. And, we are in a world where we're seeing the very measurable, concrete differences between outcomes for people who have and do not have money. So I don't think we're in like that. That is a big challenge for people right now. I don't have a good answer for that.
Okay.
I wish I did. I think, when I say, like, with jealousy and envy about something people are doing, we can do something about it. But for that, it feels like
a lottery in a way.
It does. It is a lottery.
You
Let's
can
be
put
honest.
so much work into something and someone else,
It's a lottery. But I guess I would say if you're using it as a proxy for your success, stop doing that. Because your success really is about how you are affecting people in your life. And your life might be just a few people and it might be a lot of people. But that's really what matters.
Well, they say, like, on your deathbed, right, is anyone going to ask how much money you had? But,
or like,
no one,
I wish I spent more time, more hours in the office.
No.
Right,
no.
Exactly.
I feel like you do probably such a good work-life balance.
I do now.
Yeah.
I do now, but I didn't.
Yeah.
But I do now,
I would love to wrap up. I think a really difficult thing in society right now is like dating and relationships. I think you said somewhere, I mean, obviously about body language and whatnot, but what do you feel like people are doing wrong? I saw a video you also posted about like dating apps and how people represent themselves.
Yeah.
The only thing I would say on top of that too, before hearing your thoughts on that, is type A woman, this ambitious, go-getter, career-driven woman, tend to have more difficulty finding a partner. I don't know why this is.
So do you think is that empirically true? Like, do we know for certain that's true, or is that anecdotal?
I don't know 100%, but I have seen like tons and tons of studies and tons of videos that say these type A career-driven women, they struggle with dating more.
I think that to the extent that that's true, and it's fine. Like, I study gender stereotypes and stereotype backlash and how women are penalized for being strong and ambitious. So I'm not saying that that's not a real phenomenon, but I guess I'm saying, do you want to be with those people?
No, yeah. Like, feminine and whatever energy, that's, I feel like, where this came from.
Yeah.
These terms.
But if it's harder, okay, you probably don't want to be with those people who don't want to date you. They can't deal with it, and so maybe it takes longer, but you get a better catch in the end. But I think what I find so interesting and fun about body language, and it actually bucks the kind of norm or the expectation about women, is that both men and women prefer photos of people who are in more expansive, confident postures on dating apps. So that is seen as more attractive across the board. People are attracted to confident people, not arrogant people, but confident people. It feels safer to be around somebody who's confident, right? You're not worried that you're going to get into a situation where you're, taking care of somebody from the first minute. So I think don't be afraid to show your joyful, confident self. It is appealing to people, and you will find the right person that way.
I've gotten so good the older that I got. I think when I turned 27, I just really realized, like, this whole, you're too ambitious, you're too type A, then I don't want to be with those people.
Absolutely.
And if that makes me single till I die, like, I find that unlikely. But I think it's gotten a lot of these things I find, and I mean, you're a psychologist, so you'd know 10 times more, but I find a lot of topics that end up doing very well on social media. Like, and you don't have to chime in on this, but I feel like I've seen so much stuff. It seems everyone has ADHD nowadays. I've never seen so... I'm a serial multitasker.
Everyone is ADHD.
Yeah, and it's you don't want to say it in the wrong way and then get canceled. But it's like, Does everyone really have ADHD, or everyone wants to tweet they do?
Or are we all just like overwhelmed by tasks
Yeah.
and we need to simplify our lives, right?
But I'm here, like, people are clinically diagnosed with that.
I know,
and people will
I know.
see me and they're like, do you have ADHD? Do you have ADD? And I'm like, no, I'm just fucking bored.
Yeah.
Like, I'm watching a show and then I'm on my email.
Yeah,
Someone asked me
yeah.
that the other day and I said, no, this show sucks.
Yeah.
The minute it gets exciting again, I'll come back. It's
Yeah,
not my
yeah, fair
ADHD.
enough,
I'm just
right.
fucking bored.
Exactly.
Like, oh my God. It's just,
some
I
people
don't know.
just have a higher need for stimulation.
It's ridiculous.
And that's fine.
Yeah. But there's a difference.
Absolutely.
So, Amy, what makes you fearless?
Ooh, not many things make me fearless, but things make me able to push through my fear. And that is really thinking about, okay, my fear, is often around standing up in social situations for the right thing. I'm the book that I'm writing right now is about adult bullying and what does it take for a bystander to stand up and say that's not okay? And what it takes is for me to say to myself, what happens if I do nothing? How am I going to see myself? So how I'm going to see myself, can I live with myself? That is what makes me push through my fear. I know that no matter what happens, I will be so much happier with myself if I'm brave and stand up and do the right thing. So it's my anticipation of how I view myself in the future.
And do you have one piece of advice for someone who's struggling to get out of their own way? They're like too scared to start something or
it's
keep
funny,
procrastinating about it.
I always say get out of the way of yourself so you can be yourself. Yeah. I think I would say, remember that the more that we sort of try to manage the impression that we're making on others and get sort of micro-focused in that way, the harder interactions actually become, and the more people see us as inauthentic. So the more you can allow yourself to feel your own sense of personal power and to show up as yourself and know that that doesn't mean everyone's going to like you, the more likely you will be to walk away feeling a sense of satisfaction and not regret.
Amy, where can everyone find out more about you, your work, your books?
AmyCuddy.com. And, I am on Instagram, just Amy Cuddy, and on LinkedIn. That's where I'm active, on those two places. My book is called Presence, Bringing Your Boldest Self to Your Biggest Challenges. And I think it's universally applicable to challenging situations.
I learned so much.
Thank
I'm so
you.
glad I met that guy on the bus.
Oh, I know, I am too.
I know.
Thanks, guy on the bus.
I know. I will link everything about you in the show notes. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Oh,
thank you, everyone who watched the show. Make sure to head to the show notes to find out more about Amy, her books, and of course, if you're interested in buying any Chief Swag Officer mic covers or any of other products, the link in the show notes as well will take you right to the site. And I will see you guys next week for a new episode of Dare to Be Fearless.